Sometimes the universe doesn't whisper, it slams the past in your face when you least expect it, and in that collision you realize just how far you've come, or how much you're still carrying. Ex-husband flaunts his fiancée, unaware his ex-wife's new boyfriend is a billionaire. Natalie Carter never imagined she'd run into her ex-husband Brandon Walsh again, especially under such extraordinary circumstances. The last time they saw each other, they had signed their divorce papers and walked away in a haze of heartbreak and resentment. Now 2 years later, he's parading around his dazzling fiancée, Vanessa Green, at a high-profile charity function, completely clueless about the secret behind Natalie's new boyfriend, Damian Westwood. What Brandon doesn't know is that Damian isn't just another humble philanthropist. He's a billionaire with immense power and influence, ready to sweep Natalie into a life of luxury she never dared to dream of. Prepare for a roller coaster of revenge, scandal, and bittersweet redemption. Rain lashed against the windows of a cozy cafe on East 78th Street as Natalie Carter sipped her cappuccino. It was an unusually cold afternoon for early May in San Francisco, and the Café Clara's table was bustling with people seeking shelter from the downpour. Natalie, dressed in a simple navy blouse and faded jeans, felt an odd blend of peace and lingering unease. Just a year ago, she couldn't have pictured herself sitting here, calm and composed after the emotional storm of her divorce. Her thoughts drifted back to the day she and Brandon finalized their separation. There had been shouting, tears, and bitter accusations, anger and regret thick in the air. They'd started out as college sweethearts, so sure that love could conquer anything. But over time, Brandon's ambition twisted into cutthroat competitiveness, and Natalie's hope for a supportive partner shattered under his relentless criticism. They argued constantly about money, lifestyle, and their future. Eventually, the fractures turned into wide, unfixable cracks. A blaring horn outside snapped her back to the present. She instinctively checked her phone. Damian Westwood, the man she had been seeing for the past 2 months, had promised to meet her after his board meeting. From there, they planned to head to an art gallery opening hosted by her dear friend, Amira Lin, an up-and-coming curator. That familiar, cautious voice inside her warned not to get too hopeful. Yet Damian had never given her any reason to doubt him. He was thoughtful, respectful, and shockingly modest for a man whose quiet generosity often left her speechless. Right then, the bell above the cafe door jingled. Natalie looked up, expecting to see Damian. Instead, her heart nearly stopped. Brandon Walsh stepped in, shaking the rain off his umbrella. He hadn't changed much. Still tall, still confident, still carrying that faint hint of arrogance in the way he scanned the room. Her stomach tightened. A familiar ache stirred inside her. She thought about ducking behind her coffee cup, but it was already too late. He had seen her. "Natalie," he said, walking toward her table with cautious curiosity. "Wow. Long time no see." Brandon wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost as much as a month's rent in the Marina District. His hair, once boyish and messy, was now carefully styled. He looked every inch the polished corporate success he'd always wanted to become. Brandon glanced at the chair across from her. Without asking, he pulled it out and sat down, ignoring the small line of customers still waiting. Typical Brandon, he always had to be the center of attention. "Yes, it's been a while," Natalie said, trying to keep her voice steady. Despite her efforts, her hands trembled slightly. She gently set her coffee cup back on the saucer to hide it. It felt surreal to see him again in such an unexpected moment. For a brief second, she wondered what life had thrown at him lately. Then came the memories, the arguments, the bitter fights that had led to their split. The endless accusations, who made more money, who supported who gave up more. She took a steadying breath. She wasn't about to let those memories shake her. "You look good," Brandon said, leaning back casually. "I heard you moved back into the city. How have you been?" He tried to smile, but it came off a little stiff. They weren't the same people who had once shared a life. "I'm doing fine," Natalie replied. "Just taking things one day at a time." "And you?" "Busy as ever. I just had a meeting nearby with a client," he said, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the edge of the table. Then came a pause. "Listen, I know things didn't end well." Natalie braced herself for a snide remark, a jab, something bitter. But instead, he cleared his throat and picked up a napkin, wiping at a spot on the table that wasn't even there. He was stalling. There was maybe, just maybe, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "But I do hope you're doing okay," he said at last. "I am," she answered softly. She didn't know if it was entirely true or if she just wanted it to be. "Really, I'm okay." That was when the cafe door swung open again, letting in a gust of wind and light drizzle. Natalie's heart skipped. Damien walked in, scanning the room. Tall, composed, dressed in a tailored navy blazer and matching slacks that made him stand out effortlessly. He spotted Natalie, and a warm smile spread across his face. Brandon followed her gaze, his brow furrowing ever so slightly, confusion giving way to something colder, calculation. "Natalie," Damien said, walking over with a calm, self-assured presence. "Sorry I'm late, the meeting ran long." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and leaned down to press a soft kiss to her cheek. The warmth of that small gesture sent a ripple of comfort through her, just enough to steady the storm rising beneath her skin. Brandon arched an eyebrow. "So this is?" Natalie felt a brief wave of awkwardness rise in her chest, and under it, a flicker of dread. This moment, inevitable and yet far too soon. "Brandon, this is Damien Westwood, my boyfriend. Damien, this is Brandon Walsh, my ex-husband." The tension that hung over the table was nearly tangible. It clung to the air like static before a lightning strike. Damien, ever composed, extended his hand toward Brandon. "Nice to meet you," he said with quiet grace. Brandon took it, but with noticeable stiffness. "Likewise," he replied. He sounded polite, but his eyes betrayed something else. They flickered over Damien, sizing him up the way one might measure a rival. A flicker of something primal passed between them. Respect? Jealousy? Challenge? Natalie couldn't tell, but she felt it in her bones. "Well, I should get going," Brandon added abruptly. "I have to pick up Vanessa." Natalie felt a sudden twinge at the name. She vaguely remembered Brandon mentioning a coworker named Vanessa during the last year of their marriage, someone he had seemed to admire. Maybe a little too much. Or perhaps it had just been her insecurities. But if it had only been in her head, why did it still sting like truth left unspoken? Either way, the mention of her stirred something sharp beneath the surface. Brandon was engaged, apparently. Still, Natalie masked her emotions with a practiced expression of neutrality. She'd worn it so often in the final year of their marriage, it fit her like second skin. "Nice running into you, Natalie," Brandon said, then nodded at Damien. "And it was nice meeting you, Mr. Westwood. Maybe we'll cross paths again." Damien gave a measured smile. "Perhaps. Take care." With that, Brandon slipped out of the cafe, leaving behind the faint trail of expensive cologne and a cloud of unanswered questions. Natalie inhaled slowly, the scent triggering a memory she didn't want. Damien pulled out a chair and sat across from Natalie, placing a careful hand over hers. "You all right?" he asked softly. Natalie forced a smile, determined not to let the encounter throw her off course. "I'm okay," she murmured. "Just surprised, that's all." He gently squeezed her hand. "If he ever bothers you, or if you just need space, I'll handle it." There was no bravado in his voice, just quiet resolve. "No, it's fine," she said quickly. "I'm over him, at least I think I am." She let out a sigh, trying to ignore the way Brandon's presence still made her chest feel tight. Not from longing, but from the familiar ache of having once loved someone who never really saw her. "Let's just head to the gallery," she said, standing. "Amir's expecting us." Damien nodded, rising and helping her with her coat like the gentleman he always was. As they stepped back out into the rain-slicked street, Natalie realized Brandon had left her with a swirl of emotions she wasn't quite ready to unpack. Swirling inside her was a storm of thoughts. What she didn't know was that this unexpected encounter was only the beginning of a tangled web about to unfold. A web that would pit old resentments against new hopes, and uncover secrets so staggering that no one involved would walk away unchanged. 2 days later, Natalie found herself tucked in the sunlit corner of her apartment, flipping through old photo albums she had shoved into storage after the divorce. Why she'd chosen this particular moment to revisit those memories, she wasn't sure. Maybe seeing Brandon had stirred something deep inside her, a flood of nostalgia, both sweet and bitter. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Amira Lynn. "Did you see the article in the Chronicle about Brandon's upcoming engagement party? Apparently it's going to be huge. Like, society pages huge." "You okay?" and quickly typed back, "I'm fine. Just a bit surprised. We ran into each other yesterday." Amira responded with a barrage of shocked emojis, followed by, "He's totally showing off Vanessa. Word is she's from a big-name family. Sounds like they're throwing a ridiculously over-the-top event next month. If you need backup, you know I'm your girl." Natalie exhaled deeply. So that was it. Brandon, ever obsessed with status, was turning his new engagement into a social spectacle. She felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. Hurt, maybe. They had once talked about a vow renewal for their 10th anniversary. Something intimate, something real, just family and close friends. That dream had crumbled, replaced now by his new, glittering celebration with someone else. She turned another page in the album. There it was. A photo from their college years. Brandon, all messy hair and gleaming eyes, hugging her in front of their dorm building. That younger version of them looked so hopeful, so sure they had forever. How had it gone so wrong? She set the photo aside, refusing to let herself spiral. Life had changed since the divorce. She was no longer that version of herself. She had her own architecture studio now, Carter Design Studio, and had kept the Carter name, mostly because the business had been legally registered under it well before the marriage fell apart. She'd built a small but promising client list. And then there was Damien. He had entered her life like a breath of fresh air. She thought of his kind eyes and his easy, calming presence. They'd met at a charity gala that Amira had dragged her to months ago. He had been quietly introduced as a philanthropic donor, one who kept a low profile despite his apparent generosity to social causes. They had clicked instantly, bonding over their love for art, architecture, and travel. She'd only heard vague hints about the depth of his wealth, something about a large inheritance from his grandfather, a stake in a tech empire, but Damien rarely talked about money. Ownership in a tech conglomerate, though Damien rarely talked about his finances. When he first asked Natalie out, she had hesitated, unsure if she was ready for anything serious. But something about Damien made her feel safe. Trust came easily with him. They'd been quietly building their relationship ever since. Her phone pinged, pulling her from the fog of old memories. This time it was a message from Damien himself. "Dinner tonight? Or I can swing by your studio and we grab drinks after." Natalie smiled at the screen, a soft warmth washing over her. She typed back, "Dinner sounds perfect. I'm heading to the studio for a few hours, but I'll be free by 6. See you then." She gently closed the photo album and slid it back into its dusty box, tucking it deep in her closet. A symbolic act, perhaps, hoping she could store away the emotional baggage with it. Brandon and Vanessa's grand engagement party would no doubt become the buzz of social circles. But Natalie had her own life now, her own story to write. Still, something gnawed at her. A strange intuition that her path with Brandon wasn't finished yet. That the ex-husband she'd tried to leave in the past might soon come charging back into her life, bringing drama in his wake. Later that evening, the delicate chime above the door of a charming French bistro rang as Damien guided Natalie inside, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. The restaurant, Maison Lune, was one of the most sought-after spots in Pacific Heights, known for its layered soufflés and impeccable wine list. Soft jazz floated in the background, mingling with the warm glow from antique chandeliers. The maitre d' recognized Damien immediately and led them to a private corner table. Away from curious glances, Natalie settled into her seat, admiring the elegant place setting, polished silverware, crisp white linens, everything arranged with care. She noticed a few diners at nearby tables casting glances toward Damien, as though they recognized him, or at least suspected he was someone notable. She was used to it by now. Any time they went out, there was always that little ripple of speculation. Damien handled it with quiet grace, never arrogant, never overly revealing, just poised. "I took the liberty of ordering a bottle of your favorite red," Damien said, his smile warm. "I thought we could celebrate your big news." Natalie's lips curved with delight. Earlier that day, she had signed a major contract with a boutique hotel chain, an opportunity that could elevate Carter Design Studio to the next level. The firm had discovered her work through social media and reached out after seeing her latest portfolio. "That's so thoughtful," she said. "I still can't believe they picked me." Damien reached across the table and took her hand. You deserve every success. Congratulations. There was something about the way he said it, soft, certain, like he truly believed in her more than she ever had in herself. A sommelier approached with the wine, carefully pouring them each a glass. They toasted quietly, the soft clink of crystal echoing through the intimate space. Outside, rain streaked softly down the windows, blurring the city lights and cocooning them in their own quiet world. Natalie took a sip, the velvety red wine warming her throat. The conversation flowed naturally as they caught up on each other's day. Damien mentioned an upcoming trip to London for a philanthropic conference, though, true to form, he avoided sharing too many details about his financial affairs. She wondered, not for the first time, what he held back. Not out of secrecy, but perhaps out of habit or protection. There were walls around him, elegant but firm. Natalie, on the other hand, lit up as she spoke about her new design concepts for the boutique hotel. Her mind had been racing with ideas since the contract was signed. She described sketches and mood boards with a kind of energy she hadn't felt in years. And he listened, not just politely, but with real interest. Halfway through the meal, her plate filled with a rich coq au vin, his with a perfectly seared salmon, Damien set down his fork and cleared his throat. I've been thinking, he began, glancing at his plate as if gathering the right words, about introducing you to some people in my circle, friends, business associates. I want them to know about the incredible woman I'm with. There was a flicker of vulnerability in his voice that she rarely saw, like this mattered more than he let on. Natalie paused, fork halfway to her mouth. You do? She asked, her heart skipping a beat. It wasn't just the invitation, it was the meaning beneath it. The line between his world and hers was about to blur. They had been dating for a couple of months, and things had been growing stronger. Still, meeting people from his inner circle felt like a big step, especially when those circles likely included powerful executives, dignitaries, and influencers. Would they look at her as an outsider? Would she look at herself that way too? Damien nodded, placing his napkin gently on the table. I don't want to pressure you, but there's a fundraiser next week. I'd like you to come, be by my side if that's okay. He held her gaze with quiet intensity, as though silently reassuring her she belonged. A swirl of emotions tugged at her, excitement, curiosity, and a flicker of nerves. Of course, she replied softly, I'd be honored. Damien's face lit up with warmth. He reached across the table again, gently rubbing his thumb over her knuckles. Thank you. I'm really happy to have you in my life, Natalie. She smiled, but part of her heart ached in the best way, like it was healing faster than she could process. They lingered over dessert, an exquisite flourless chocolate torte, talking about lighter things, favorite books, childhood memories, travel dreams. Natalie found herself floating in a quiet sense of contentment, warmed by the possibility of a new chapter ahead. For the first time, the future didn't feel like something she had to brace for. It felt like something she could reach for. Brandon's name hovered unspoken between them, but she didn't feel the need to bring him up. Tonight belonged to Damien, to peace, to hope. By the time they finished, the bistro had begun to close. I'll drive you home, Damien said, guiding her to a sleek black sedan waiting at the curb. She remembered the first time he'd shown up with a private driver. She had insisted on taking a cab, because the idea of arriving in a chauffeured car felt too indulgent. But over time, she'd become more comfortable with the life Damien lived, even if she still preferred to pay her own way whenever she could. She'd grown more at ease with Damien's world, though she still insisted on paying her own way whenever she could. Inside the car, Damien's arm draped around her shoulders as she leaned into him. Relaxed. She closed her eyes, letting the soft glow of the city lights flicker across the windows as they wove through the streets of San Francisco. The hum of the engine lulled her into a quiet, peaceful reverie. In that moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life was finally moving forward, free from the heartbreak that had once consumed her. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Natalie's architecture studio. She sat at her drafting table, carefully finalizing the sketches for the boutique hotel project. Pencil strokes curved into elegant lines, forming arches and forms that reflected her vision of a modern yet inviting interior. The sharp ring of her desk phone jolted her from her creative flow. "Natalie Carter, Carter Design Studio," she answered, tucking her pencil behind her ear. "Natalie, it's me," came Amira's animated voice. "You're not going to believe this." Natalie sat up straighter. "What?" "I just heard from a colleague at the Chronicle that Brandon and Vanessa are hosting their engagement soiree at the Four Seasons next week. And guess what? They're apparently inviting everyone from your old circle, friends, acquaintances, even a few of your past clients." Natalie's stomach turned. "Why would they invite me, though?" she asked. "Yeah, that's the weird part," Amira replied. "Word is Brandon didn't want you there, but Vanessa insisted. She told the Chronicle she wants a harmonious future, or maybe she just wants to flex a little." Amira paused, then softened her tone. "I know you probably don't care anymore, but I thought you should know, just in case an invitation shows up." Natalie let out a long, slow breath. She hadn't expected Brandon's engagement to go so public, but knowing his obsession with appearances, she wasn't shocked. "Thanks for the heads up," Natalie said. "If I get invited, I'll think long and hard before deciding anything." "Just remember," Amira added, "you don't owe them a single thing." Natalie smiled faintly at that. "How's Damien, by the way?" At the mention of him, Natalie's lips curved upward. "He's good. Actually, he wants to introduce me to his circle at this fancy fundraiser next week." Amira laughed. "Ooh, big week coming up for you, huh? Better you than me. But seriously, I'm so happy for you. And if you need a +1 to Brandon's fiasco, or a bodyguard, I'm your girl." They ended the call, and Natalie stared at the phone for a beat, her thoughts swirling. She was certain Brandon's event would be a sparkling showcase of high society and power brokers. A celebration of wealth, influence, and polished smiles. Vanessa Green, she now remembered, came from old Boston money. Rumor had it she was a sharp corporate attorney. Brandon probably saw her as the perfect combination: romantic interest and strategic advantage. Romantic and strategic match. That afternoon, a delivery courier arrived at Natalie's apartment with a large, cream-colored envelope embossed in gold. Her pulse quickened. A chill ran through her despite the warm cup of tea in her hand. Something about the weight of the envelope felt ominous. The return address read, "Mr. Brandon Walsh and Miss Vanessa Green." She sighed. So the rumors were true. They'd really invited her. Inside, the invitation was thick, glossy, and unmistakably extravagant, detailing the upcoming soiree at the Four Seasons. Natalie slipped it back into the envelope, unsure whether to toss it into the trash or bury it in a drawer. It seemed too loud to ignore, too insulting to acknowledge. Part of her suspected this was a calculated move by Vanessa, either to appear gracious or to flaunt their social elevation. Or maybe it was something more insidious. A subtle message: "You're welcome to watch what you lost." Later that evening, as she settled into her couch with a throw blanket draped over her lap, Natalie mulled over the invitation. She decided she'd bring it up with Damien, get his perspective. Maybe they'd just skip it entirely. But the envelope still sat on her coffee table like a dare. A glossy provocation in cursive print. She had no desire to watch Brandon parade his fiancée around a ballroom, to watch them toast champagne in the same room where she might still be seen as a ghost. And yet, a small voice inside whispered that maybe, just maybe, it would be empowering to walk in on her own terms, with someone who cherished her, to show them that she was no longer the broken woman Brandon had left behind, that she had risen from the ashes of their past, not bitter, but better. She picked up her phone and called Damien. He answered on the second ring. "Natalie," he greeted. "I was just thinking of you." "Well," she said with a hint of dry amusement in her voice, "I've received something interesting." "Oh?" Natalie exhaled. "An invitation to Brandon's engagement soiree." Damien paused on the other end. "How are you feeling about that?" She curled into the corner of the couch, hugging the pillow tighter. "I'm conflicted. Part of me wants nothing to do with it, but another part of me? I don't know. Maybe I want closure. Maybe I just want to prove to myself that I'm okay." Her voice wavered slightly, caught between old wounds and new strength. She hesitated. "Also, it wasn't Brandon who sent it. Vanessa specifically invited me. It almost feels like a trap, but maybe I'm reading too much into it. Or maybe it was exactly that, bait disguised as courtesy." Damien's voice was calm, reassuring. "Whatever you decide, I'll be right there with you. If you want to go, I'll stand by your side. If you don't, we can do something else, something far from that circus." His words wrapped around her like armor, quiet but impenetrable. Natalie's body relaxed, the knot in her chest loosening. The storm inside her didn't pass, but it finally paused. "I'll think about it," she said softly. "For now, we still have your fundraiser next week. That's where my focus is." What Natalie didn't realize was that the upcoming days would bring a collision of worlds. Brandon, Vanessa, and Damien, each from different lives, about to converge in a way she could never predict. And when they finally did, the fallout would be unlike anything she had ever experienced. The following week arrived in a blur of nerves and anticipation. Natalie stood in front of the mirror in Damien's penthouse, a sleek and spacious home overlooking the Bay Bridge. The skyline twinkled in the distance, a glittering mosaic of light and possibility. She wore an elegant, emerald green evening gown that hugged her figure just right. Amira had come over earlier to help style her hair into a soft, loose chignon. Now, as Natalie looked at her reflection, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Quiet confidence. She wasn't entirely sure she felt it yet, but at least she looked the part. Damien, adjusting his cufflinks, stepped up beside her. "You look breathtaking," he murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Natalie replied with a small smile. "I still don't know who all is going to be there." Damien paused for a moment. "It's going to be a mix: philanthropists, investors, and a few celebrities who support the foundation. These events can be a lot. If at any point you want to leave, just say the word." They arrived at the grand ballroom of the Laurelwood Hotel, greeted by a frenzy of flashing cameras and sleek luxury cars rolling up to the entrance. A crowd of polished donors and socialites flowed toward the entrance. Natalie stayed close to Damien, feeling a rush of relief as they finally stepped inside the elegantly adorned venue. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and servers moved gracefully with trays of champagne flutes. Almost immediately, a striking woman with auburn hair approached, beaming. "Damien, darling," she cooed, kissing both of his cheeks. "So good to see you. And who is this stunning lady?" Damien placed a hand gently at Natalie's back. "Monica, meet Natalie Carter, my girlfriend. Natalie, this is Monica Herrera. She's on the board of the Global Arts Foundation." Monica's eyes lit up. "Pleasure to meet you, my dear. Damien's told me you're an architect. How wonderful. We must talk about the new cultural center we're developing in Berkeley." They exchanged pleasantries, and though Natalie smiled graciously, she felt slightly overwhelmed by Monica's energy. More people soon joined them, the conversations following a predictable rhythm. Cordial introductions, mild curiosity about Natalie's background, and then a quick pivot to philanthropic endeavors or business ventures. She quickly realized many of these guests lived in a world far beyond her own, a world where alliances were formed over charity galas and seven-figure donations. Midway through the evening, Natalie drifted toward a quieter corner to admire an exhibit highlighting the foundation's work. Photos of hospitals built in underserved regions, art scholarships awarded to young talents, and environmental restoration projects spanning continents. She was quietly reading a plaque about a wildlife conservation effort in Africa when a voice startled her from behind. "Natalie Carter? Is that you?" The voice was male and vaguely familiar. She turned around and froze. It was David Russell, an old acquaintance of Brandon's and someone he used to meet with about real estate ventures. David's eyes widened in recognition. "Almost didn't believe it. How are you?" Natalie forced a polite smile. "I'm well, David. Didn't expect to see you here." Her voice was calm, but a familiar tightness crept into her chest, the kind that came from standing too close to old ghosts. "I'm a sponsor," he replied, swirling the wine in his glass. "Always good for business to donate to worthy causes, right?" He gave a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, the kind of grin that said, "I'm here to be seen, not to feel." "Actually, I've got a table next to, Brandon Walsh. At the engagement party, you planning to attend?" Natalie felt her posture stiffen. Like a reflex, her spine straightened, her breath caught. The mention of Brandon's name still came with static. "Still deciding?" she said carefully. David chuckled low. "You should go. Brandon's been bragging non-stop about his new fiancée. Something about her father's connections in DC. He's definitely on a roll." Might be worth seeing what you're missing. A flicker of annoyance rippled through her, and beneath it, something sharper. Disgust, maybe, at how easily Brandon turned relationships into business strategies. Trust me, I'm not missing anything, she replied coolly. Besides, I'm here with someone else. She glanced around, hoping Damien would appear and give her an out. She didn't want to look like she needed rescuing, but just this once, she wouldn't mind the interruption. David caught the hint. All right, I'll let you go. Take care, Natalie. He winked, subtle and smug, and drifted away like a shadow that overstayed its welcome. He wandered off, wine glass in hand, leaving a bitter taste behind, reminders of a life she no longer wanted. She exhaled and leaned against the exhibit display, trying to collect herself. A painting of a fractured cityscape loomed behind her, too metaphorical for comfort. Suddenly, a warm hand touched her shoulder. She turned. Damien was there, concern in his eyes. Relief washed through her like sunlight breaking through fog. Everything okay? Natalie nodded, forcing a small smile. Yeah, just someone from my old life. Want to get some air? Please. He guided her to a terrace overlooking the glittering skyline. The cool night breeze brushed her cheeks. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself, comforted by his presence behind her. Natalie, Damien said quietly, I know bumping into people from your past can stir up things you'd rather leave behind. But I hope you know, I'm here for you. She turned to face him, tears threatening to rise. It wasn't just David. It was the whole tangled history threatening to rise to the surface. Thank you, she whispered. I'm okay. It's hard sometimes. Brandon's engagement party is just days away, and I guess I'm still dealing with how he used to undermine me. I don't want to be that woman who can't let go. She hated how her voice cracked on the last word, but it felt honest. Damien reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. You're not that woman, he said softly, but if you feel like you need to go to that party for closure, I'll go with you. A small spark of gratitude flared in her chest, and with it, the realization that this wasn't just about the past, it was about reclaiming her place in her own future. I appreciate that, she murmured, stepping closer and resting her head against his shoulder. High above the city, under the golden shimmer of skyscraper lights, Natalie couldn't shake the feeling that something was stirring. That Brandon's grand event wouldn't just be an engagement celebration. Secrets were rising to the surface, ones that could change everything, believed about her past and her future. The Four Seasons Hotel shimmered with opulence as Natalie arrived, hand in hand with Damien. After much thought, she had decided to attend Brandon's engagement soiree. It felt like the necessary final step to close the door on that chapter of her life. Damien, in a sleek black tuxedo, stood tall and steady beside her, a calm, quiet strength. Natalie wore a midnight blue gown that contrasted beautifully with her dark hair, and for the first time in a long while, she felt an inner confidence she wished she'd had years earlier. A red carpet stretched along the hotel entrance, where paparazzi snapped photos of high-profile guests, CEOs, politicians, and socialites, as they stepped into the event. Inside, a lavish floral arrangement dominated the grand foyer. Classical music floated in from a string quartet in the ballroom, while waiters glided between guests, offering trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Within minutes, Brandon appeared. He looked sharp in a custom-tailored suit, his expression flickering with surprise as his eyes landed on Natalie and Damien. At his side stood Vanessa Green, radiant in a silver gown that shimmered under the chandelier light. Her auburn hair was swept into a graceful updo. Vanessa's gaze settled on Natalie with polite interest. Natalie? Vanessa greeted warmly, extending a hand. I'm so glad you could make it. Brandon mentioned he'd run into you recently. Natalie shook her hand, noting the massive diamond on Vanessa's finger. Thank you for the invitation, she said with a carefully polite smile. Brandon cleared his throat. Damien, he said with a nod. Good to see you again. Damien responded with calm grace. Likewise, congratulations on your engagement. An awkward pause followed before Vanessa gently touched Brandon's arm and excused them both to greet other guests. Natalie exhaled and looked at Damien with quiet gratitude. Well, that wasn't too bad, she whispered, though her pulse still thudded in her chest. They made their way deeper into the ballroom, sampling hors d'oeuvres and chatting with a few acquaintances. Amira was there too with her boyfriend and waved Natalie over to a corner. They chatted for a bit, Amira slipping in dry, witty remarks about Brandon's over-the-top chord choices, but despite the laughter, a subtle current of tension wove through the evening. From afar, they watched as Brandon and Vanessa held court. Vanessa was poised and polished, exuding a calm sophistication in every glance and gesture. Brandon, for his part, appeared proud, almost smug, as he introduced her to high-powered figures in the room. It was a spectacle of social maneuvering that made Natalie's head spin. Partway through the night, a hush fell over the ballroom. Brandon stepped up to a microphone and tapped it twice. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "Vanessa and I want to thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate our engagement. We're thrilled to share our happiness with so many of you." His smile was polished, his tone just humble enough to sound rehearsed. Polite applause rippled across the crowd. Vanessa took the mic with a poised smile. "I couldn't be more grateful to have Brandon by my side. We're looking forward to many milestones together, and we're touched to have friends and family here supporting us tonight. Thank you." Her delivery was flawless, but Natalie couldn't help noticing the way Vanessa's fingers tightened briefly around the microphone, her smile just a second too long. Another polite wave of applause. Brandon handed the mic off to the band, which immediately began playing a lively tune. The conversations resumed. Waiters appeared with fresh flutes of champagne. Damien turned toward Natalie with a quiet smile. "You've handled yourself like a queen," he whispered. His voice wrapped around her like a protective veil in the middle of the storm. She let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I think that's enough closure for me," she said softly. "Maybe we can slip out soon." The weight of the room, the eyes, the carefully curated masks, it was all starting to feel suffocating. But before they could move, a voice sneered behind them. "Slipping out so soon? You haven't even properly congratulated the happy couple." Natalie turned. It was Brandon's mother, Patricia Walsh, a woman known for her love of pearls and thinly veiled judgment. She had once adored Natalie. That changed after the divorce, when Patricia had apparently decided that everything was Natalie's fault. The smile on Patricia's lips was practiced, but her eyes held sharp edges. "Hello, Patricia," Natalie said, keeping her voice level. She straightened her shoulders, refusing to flinch. Patricia's eyes flicked to Damien, surveying him with open skepticism. The way she studied him felt less like curiosity and more like an appraisal. "And who is this gentleman?" she asked. Before Natalie could answer, Damien smiled politely. "My name is Damien Westwood, ma'am. I'm here with Natalie." Patricia's gaze narrowed as though mentally calculating his worth. Her fingers twitched slightly around her clutch, betraying a flicker of recognition. "You look familiar. Have we met before?" Damien remained composed. "I'm not sure," he said evenly. "Perhaps at a charity gala." There was a barely perceptible shift in his posture, subtle but alert. "That must be it," Patricia said with a sniff. But her expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew more curious. She turned back to Natalie. "I suppose it's good you've moved on, though some of us still wonder if you ever truly appreciated what Brandon brought to your life." Damien's jaw tightened subtly, but he said nothing, letting Natalie handle it. A quiet storm churned in his eyes, though his hands remained calmly at his sides, and she did. "With all due respect," she said calmly, "that's no longer your concern. I wish Brandon and Vanessa well." Her voice was even, but beneath it lay a blade of steel. Patricia's lips thinned. "Well, do enjoy the party." She pivoted and walked away, trailing tension like expensive perfume. And for a moment, Natalie could almost hear the echo of the woman she used to be, desperate for Patricia's approval. That woman was gone. Damien placed a gentle hand on Natalie's back. "You all right?" "I'm fine," she said quietly. "Let's get some air." They strolled out to a small terrace overlooking the glittering city below. The lights, music, and soft hum of conversation from inside faded into the background. Natalie finally exhaled, releasing a breath that had felt stuck in her chest all night. The tension between her shoulder blades loosened until the next storm found her. "That woman always made me feel inadequate," she murmured. The admission sat heavy on her tongue, a truth she hadn't voiced aloud in years. Damien rubbed her shoulder gently. "You're far from inadequate. I'm proud of you." for standing your ground." His words were simple, but the sincerity in them made her throat tighten. A gust of wind tousled her hair. Natalie turned toward him, about to thank him again, when a swirl of voices and rising chatter from inside the ballroom caught their attention. They exchanged a glance and quickly stepped back in. The shift in energy was immediate. Something had shifted, cracked open. At the front of the room, Brandon stood once more at the microphone, Vanessa beside him. But this time neither of them looked celebratory. They looked flustered. Their practiced poise had fractured under pressure, and the room sensed it. "Please, everyone, remain calm," Brandon's voice echoed through the speakers, tight and controlled. The room buzzed with confusion. Guests shifted uncomfortably. The hum of unease grew louder with every second. Natalie spotted a large security guard making his way through the crowd, heading straight toward them. Her pulse spiked, a reflexive dread curling in her stomach like smoke. A sudden knot twisted in her stomach. "Excuse me, Mr. Westwood," the guard said, his eyes darting between Damien and Brandon at the mic. "Could you come with me, please?" Natalie's heart sank. She gripped Damien's arm. "What's going on?" The guard looked uneasy. "We received a tip that someone might be here under false pretenses." He didn't sound convinced, but protocol had overridden courtesy. A hush fell over the room. Heads turned. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Phones were already raised, some filming, others texting. A scandal was blooming in real time. Brandon took the mic again. "Damien Westwood, we need to verify your credentials. We can't allow anyone to crash this event." His voice was calm, but his eyes flickered with something darker. Satisfaction? Or self-preservation? Natalie's mouth dropped open in disbelief. She stared at Brandon, her eyes flashing. "You invited us," she hissed under her breath. But the damage was already done. The insinuation hung in the air like a stain. Vanessa stepped forward to the microphone, clearly unnerved. "Brandon, we don't need to make this a scene," she said carefully, her voice low. But the strain in her tone betrayed her embarrassment and her fear of losing control. Damien raised his hands in a calm gesture. "It's all right," he said evenly, addressing the guard. "I'm happy to clarify who I am." He turned to the room, scanning the sea of curious faces. Some stared with suspicion, others with thinly veiled amusement. Few dared to blink. "But I would like to know who's behind this so-called tip." People whispered. The air crackled with speculation. Natalie looked sharply at Brandon, suspicion rising. Had he orchestrated this? Brandon looked confused, unsure. But nearby, Patricia stood with a look of smug satisfaction on her face. Her expression said what her sons didn't. "This is the punishment for stepping outside your station." Then, from the far corner of the ballroom, a voice cut through the tension. "I placed the call." All heads turned. A well-dressed older man stepped forward, someone Natalie instantly recognized as Gerald Preston, Vanessa's father. He stepped into the center of the room, leveling Damien with a cold, assessing stare. The silence deepened, heavy with the scent of power being wielded like a blade. "I've heard rumors about you, Mr. Westwood," he said, voice clipped and firm. "Rumors that you claim to be wealthy and philanthropic, but no one seems able to verify the source of your fortune." He looked around the room. "We can't allow just anyone into these circles." And just like that, the invitation became an interrogation. Natalie felt outrage boil in her veins. "He's not just anyone, he's—" Damien gently squeezed her hand, signaling her to stay calm. He turned to Gerald Preston with remarkable composure. "Sir, you're right. I typically keep a low profile about my finances," Damien said steadily. "But I can assure you I'm more than qualified to be here tonight. If you'd prefer, we can step aside and verify whatever credentials you need." A tense silence followed. Brandon cleared his throat, unsure of what to do. Vanessa looked horrified, clearly embarrassed by her father's public outburst. The security guard hovered, awaiting instructions. Without missing a beat, Damien calmly reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and retrieved a business card. He handed it to the guard. "If you call this number," he said coolly, "my office will confirm my identity. I'm a principal investor in ArcLight Tech, among other ventures." A ripple of surprise swept through the room. ArcLight Tech was a massive name in the technology industry. The recognition spread quickly. Gerald's face lost a shade of color as he snatched the card from the guard and read it. Brandon's expression flickered, caught somewhere between confusion and envy. Vanessa's father exhaled sharply, clearly realizing he'd made a major mistake by publicly questioning Damien. The guard spoke quietly into his earpiece. A moment later, he nodded. "It's confirmed, sir. My apologies, Mr. Westwood." He stepped back, leaving Damien free to stand unhindered. An uncomfortable silence settled over the ballroom. Damien turned to Brandon and Vanessa, his voice even but firm. "Congratulations again on your engagement," he said, "but I think we'll be leaving now." With that, he took Natalie's arm and led her toward the exit. Amira trailed behind them, muttering under her breath about the absurdity of the scene they'd just endured. Outside, in the hotel lobby, Natalie's emotions spilled over. "I can't believe they tried to throw you out like you were some kind of fraud," she said, blinking back tears of fury. Damien's expression softened. "I've dealt with worse. Let's just go home." As they stepped into the night, one truth burned bright in Natalie's mind. Brandon and Vanessa hadn't just tried to humiliate her. They had tried to publicly discredit Damien. The gloves were off now, and the next encounter wouldn't just be awkward. It would be explosive. The morning after the disastrous engagement soiree, social media exploded with speculation. Word had spread like wildfire about the confrontation at the Four Seasons. Society blogs and gossip tabloids ran with headlines like, "Billionaire called out at elite party, identity challenged in public showdown." "Investor mistaken for party crasher, fiancé's father sparks showdown at lavish engagement." That was just one of the many headlines circulating as Natalie woke to a flood of texts from Amira, gleefully detailing the online aftermath of the night's fiasco. Screenshots, video clips, social media threads with hashtags like Partygate and Westwood Mystery. The internet was feasting. Even Brandon had called her late in the night, leaving a voicemail, one she had no intention of returning. Still, curiosity got the better of her. She tapped play. "Natalie, hey. I'm sorry about what happened tonight. I had no idea Vanessa's father would react that way. Look, maybe we can talk sometime soon. Clear the air. Let me know." She deleted the message without hesitation, irritated but strangely satisfied. The sound of his voice, once so familiar, now felt like a relic from another life, one she had no desire to reopen. At least now, Damien's identity was no longer a mystery to anyone. He wasn't just the calm, reserved man at her side. He was now undeniably seen as a powerful figure with presence in elite circles. And he had handled the chaos with the same quiet strength he always carried. Not once had he flinched. Not once had he lashed out. That restraint, that grace under fire, spoke volumes more than any headline ever could. That morning, he invited Natalie to his penthouse for breakfast. Over buttery croissants and strong coffee, they debriefed the entire event, his tone colored with light amusement. "I guess the Prestons think I'm some con artist who sweet-talked my way into high society," he said, shaking his head with a dry chuckle. "It's not the first time someone's doubted my intentions." But this time, Natalie could hear the wariness beneath the humor, the sting of being questioned not for what he'd done, but for what he represented. Natalie frowned over the rim of her mug. "It's not fair. You've done so much good. You shouldn't have to keep proving yourself." Her voice sharpened, protective now. She hated that the world demanded credentials for decency. He shrugged. "Money complicates things. People see a fortune and either want something from you or assume you're hiding something." He looked out the window briefly, eyes flicking toward the skyline as if searching for some version of himself he used to be. He reached across the small cafe table in his penthouse living room, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. "That's part of why I don't talk about it much, but I don't want you caught in the crossfire either." Natalie shook her head, gently intertwining her fingers with his. "I'm proud of who you are, Damien. If someone has a problem with it, that's on them." Her words came out firm, unwavering, because she meant everyone. A flicker of softness lit his expression, and he leaned in to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. It lingered longer than usual, as if trying to say the things words didn't yet dare to. Just then, his phone buzzed on the table. He checked the screen, brows furrowing. "Everything okay?" Natalie asked. Her stomach dipped slightly, already sensing a shift. He sighed. "Something urgent with one of my companies. There's an acquisition deal hitting a snag. I might need to fly to San Francisco tomorrow." Natalie set down her coffee, concern creeping into her voice. "For how long?" A couple of days, maybe a week, I'm not sure yet. Still, Damien exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm sorry about the timing. I hate leaving, especially after everything that just happened. Natalie offered a soft, reassuring smile. Don't worry. Go handle your business. I'll be fine. They spent the rest of the day together, strolling through the park and browsing a local art exhibit, deliberately choosing to tune out the media frenzy swirling around them. Natalie felt a deepening sense of calm in Damien's presence, as if together they could weather anything. Yet underneath her outward serenity, a lingering suspicion simmered. Brandon had never liked being overshadowed. He thrived on control and despised being made to look weak or inferior. Now that Damien's identity and his wealth were public knowledge, Natalie suspected Brandon would see it as a threat. And when Brandon felt threatened, trouble tended to follow. Her intuition proved accurate. Late that afternoon, just as she was about to return to her apartment, her phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. Natalie, it's Vanessa. The voice trembled, composed but barely. Can we meet? I need to talk to you about Brandon. Natalie's pulse quickened. Vanessa? Why would she call? Part of her braced for some kind of ambush or confrontation, maybe even an accusation that she'd upstaged the engagement soiree. But the shakiness in Vanessa's voice wasn't aggressive, it was fragile. Curiosity got the better of her. They agreed to meet at a quiet tea shop the next day. When the call ended, Natalie sat frozen for a moment, her stomach twisting. Vanessa hadn't sounded smug or performative. She'd sounded almost desperate. Maybe the picture-perfect facade of Brandon and Vanessa's engagement was already beginning to crack. And if so, what secrets might come spilling out? The next day, gray skies hung low as Natalie stepped into Marlowe's tea house in Midtown, a cozy spot known for its loose-leaf blends and calming ambiance. She slipped into a corner booth, scanning the softly lit space. Vanessa arrived shortly after, wearing a black trench coat over a cream blouse. Her posture was stiff, and when she removed her coat, her hands trembled ever so slightly. Thank you for meeting me, Vanessa said quietly, settling across from her. Natalie studied her face. There were faint shadows under her eyes. She didn't look anything like the glowing fiancée from the engagement party. No problem, Natalie replied gently. What's going on? A server came by, and Vanessa ordered chamomile tea. Natalie asked for Earl Grey. They sat in awkward silence until the server left. Vanessa cleared her throat. I know this might sound strange, but I don't have many people I can talk to about Brandon. She hesitated, eyes dropping to the table. He never speaks much about you, but I did some digging. I know how your marriage ended, abruptly, painfully. Natalie's stomach tightened. What do you want to know? Vanessa laced her fingers together tightly. Her knuckles turned white as if bracing herself against her own thoughts. Is he always this controlling? She hesitated, then continued, voice quiet but edged with frustration. I've seen glimpses before, but last night, how he handled the fiasco with your boyfriend, he was furious. Not because his father embarrassed Damien, but because he felt overshadowed. We had a huge fight afterward. Her lip trembled just for a second, before she steeled herself again. Natalie studied Vanessa's face, weighing how honest to be. She recognized that haunted look. She'd worn it herself once in the mirror. There was no point in sugarcoating the truth. Brandon has a need to win, she began softly. Everything in our marriage turned into a competition. It didn't start out that way. In college, he was driven, but kind. But over time, his ambition became everything. He set these impossibly high expectations. And if I didn't meet them, he'd tear me down. Her voice tightened, not with anger, but with the memory of being slowly eroded. She paused. He never saw me as his equal. It was always about him. Vanessa's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She blinked fast, like she refused to let them fall. Not here, not yet. I'm starting to see that too. After last night, he stormed around the penthouse, shouting about how he'd be damned if he let some nobody show him up. I pointed out that Damien is clearly not a nobody, and Brandon lost it. She looked down at her hands, voice trembling. I have money, connections, but Brandon wants more than that. He wants me to help him climb. Her words cracked under the weight of realization, as if she were hearing herself for the first time. Natalie felt a pang of empathy, despite all the pain Brandon had once caused her. She remembered how charismatic he could be, how persuasive, how easy it was to get caught up in his oversized dreams. He made you feel like you were building something big together, until you realized the foundation was made of you. So why reach out to me? Natalie asked gently. Vanessa hesitated, then glanced around the tea shop, her eyes darting as though checking for eavesdroppers. Even here, in a quiet booth surrounded by warm lighting and clinking cups, she looked hunted. Because I'm not sure I can go through with this engagement, and I need to know if Brandon's ever done anything questionable, financially or otherwise. She swallowed. My father's pressuring me to go through with the wedding, but I'm scared. Her voice barely made it past her lips, but fear has a sound, and Natalie heard it loud and clear. Natalie's thoughts drifted back to the fights over money during her marriage. She remembered Brandon once trying to convince her to dip into her personal savings to fund one of his risky ventures. When she refused, he called her short-sighted and unsupportive, and that had just been the start. Every disagreement after that had a price. But illegal? Not to my knowledge, she said carefully. I can't say he ever broke the law, but he definitely manipulates situations to serve himself, usually at someone else's expense. She saw the flicker of relief and dread in Vanessa's eyes. Confirmation never felt clean. Vanessa exhaled as if something inside her had deflated. I see, she murmured. Their teas arrived and she stirred hers in silence. Vanessa stirred her tea distractedly. He's pressuring me to sign a prenup, one that heavily favors him. Something about future earnings tied to my father's investments. Natalie's eyebrows shot up. That's a huge red flag. I know, Vanessa whispered, tears threatening to spill over. He wants me to sign it before we even set a wedding date. My father thinks it's just smart business, but I'm not comfortable. And after last night, the way he went on about Damien, I realized I don't even know the man I'm engaged to. A wave of sympathy rolled through Natalie. As much anger as she held toward Brandon, she couldn't deny that Vanessa was trapped in a toxic situation. You have every right to be cautious, Natalie said gently. Listen, if you ever need someone to talk to or a place to clear your head, you can reach out to me. I'm not your enemy. Brandon is my past. Vanessa bowed her head. Thank you, I appreciate that. They sipped their tea in thoughtful silence. After a few moments, Vanessa spoke again. I'm going to talk to him. I'm planning to confront Brandon about postponing the wedding, at least until I feel more secure about everything. I just don't know how he'll take it. Natalie's mind flashed to memories of Brandon's volatility, how quickly his charm could turn to rage when he felt challenged. Whatever you decide, be safe, she said firmly. Brandon can be vindictive, especially if he feels cornered. Keep your support system close. Vanessa nodded, blinking back tears. I will. And Natalie, about what happened at the engagement party. I'm sorry for how my father treated Damien. He assumes everyone's out to exploit us, but he was wrong. He was way out of line. Natalie gave a small, kind smile. Apology accepted. They stepped outside the tea shop, clouds heavy above them. As Vanessa walked off, her shoulders hunched against the wind, Natalie stood still, watching her disappear down the street. Her heart was a tangle of emotions, pity for Vanessa, disgust for Brandon, and a flicker of relief. She had escaped that world. But something in her gut said this conversation wasn't the end of it. It was the beginning of something dangerous. Brandon, when cornered, could be ruthless, and if Vanessa truly chose to push back, she might expose a side of him Natalie knew all too well, the side that never forgave or forgot. The next morning, Natalie awoke to a flurry of frantic texts from Amira. Still half asleep, she reached for the remote and turned on the TV. A breaking news banner flashed across the screen. Brandon Walsh under investigation for fraud. Just days after his self-important engagement soiree, Brandon was now the subject of a high-profile inquiry into alleged financial crimes. Reporters claimed he had falsified records in a corporate merger, allegedly exploiting his fiancée's family connections for personal gain. Natalie stared at the news report, a storm of emotions swirling inside her, shock, vindication, and a strange, residual sadness for a man she had once loved. The headlines were brutal. Brandon's face plastered across every outlet. His downfall wasn't just public, it was cinematic. Her phone rang again. It was Amira, breathless with updates. It's everywhere, she said. He's toxic now. Investors are pulling out left and right. Vanessa's dad, Gerald Preston, pulled all of his support. And get this, word is Vanessa herself handed over evidence to the investigators. She flipped. Her tone was half in shock, half in awe. As Natalie tried to process it all, another call buzzed in, an unknown number. She answered, already bracing. Her pulse spiked. A familiar dread crept in like cold air under a door. Natalie, came the unmistakable voice of Brandon, raw, shaky, desperate. I'm out of options. They froze my accounts. Vanessa's gone. You have to help me. His voice cracked halfway through, and for a brief moment he didn't sound like the man who once stood so confidently on pedestals. He sounded like someone watching his kingdom burn. His words tumbled out like a landslide, panic laced with disbelief. She could almost hear him pacing, unraveling. The sound of papers rustling, footsteps, a hollow echo in the background, chaos unfolding in real time. Brandon, she said carefully, I'm not your wife anymore, and your problems aren't mine. If you forged documents, misled investors, that's on you. He let out a jagged, bitter laugh. Everyone thinks they know better. All these high society people, they only care about winning. I played by their rules, and now I'm the villain. Even you're abandoning me. There it was again, that voice of entitlement, cloaked in victimhood. His tone turned sharp, accusatory. You think Damien and his billions will always be there to clean up your messes? The venom in his words startled her, not because it hurt, but because it no longer had power. Natalie stiffened, but kept her voice steady. My life is no longer entangled with yours, Brandon. Don't ever call me again. Her hand trembled slightly as she hung up, but not from fear. From release. The line went dead. Natalie sat there, shaken, yet oddly free. It was the silence afterward that struck her most, not empty, but peaceful. In that moment she realized something. Brandon's collapse wasn't her responsibility. His downfall brought her the one thing she hadn't even realized she was waiting for. Closure. He was no longer a ghost from her past, just a cautionary tale, an example of unchecked ambition. And she was done carrying the weight of his failures. 2 days later, Damien returned from his business trip in San Francisco. As the elevator doors opened into the penthouse and she saw him step inside, relief rushed through Natalie like a tidal wave. Her handbag slipped from her hand as she crossed the room and threw her arms around him. He held her close, gently stroking her hair. I missed you, he murmured. She led him to the sofa, still holding his hand. Damien, she began softly, while you were away, Brandon's entire world collapsed. She explained everything. He's under investigation. Vanessa called off the engagement, and he's been calling me, begging me for help. Damien's brow furrowed with concern. He called you directly? She nodded. He wants money for a better lawyer. I said no. It felt cruel, but I can't let him drag me back into his chaos. Damien exhaled, relief clear in his expression. I'm proud of you for setting boundaries. He reached for her hand. If you ever feel threatened, I'll do whatever it takes to protect you. They spent the next few hours catching up, talking through the whirlwind of legal drama and relentless media coverage. Even the tabloids had taken an interest, drawing contrast between Damien's quiet influence and Brandon's public unraveling. Natalie hated the gossip, but Damien reassured her that rumors would pass. They always do. That evening, they attended a charity art auction supporting local artists. As they entered the sleek modern gallery, cameras flashed. Photographers snapped shots of Damien, now fully recognized as one of the city's most generous philanthropists. Natalie tensed momentarily under the attention, but Damien leaned in with a smile. Relax. We're here for a good cause. Encouraged by his warmth, she moved through the gallery, admiring various pieces until she stopped in front of one, a bold, vibrant painting full of life and color. Damien noticed. He quietly outbid every other attendee and later gifted Natalie the piece with a subtle, satisfied grin. Afterward, they hosted a small gathering at Damien's penthouse, celebrating both Natalie's new design contract with the boutique hotel chain and the striking new addition to her portfolio. Amira arrived early, throwing her arms around Natalie and launching into the latest updates on Brandon's downfall, from canceled contracts to furious investors backing out. And while a small part of Natalie still felt a sting of pity, another part knew without a doubt that she had made the right decision in walking away from him. Later that night, after the guests had left, Natalie and Damien sat quietly in the softly lit living room. City lights shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting reflections on the newly mounted painting across the room. With a glass of wine in hand, Natalie stared out at the skyline, feeling a calm she hadn't known in years. Gone were the days of doubting her worth, of shrinking under Brandon's backhanded compliments and relentless criticism. She turned to Damien, who was watching her with that familiar, quiet tenderness. "I never thought I'd end up here," she said softly, voice catching in her throat. "A year ago I was still picking up the pieces from the divorce. Now, everything feels possible." Damien reached for her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "You deserve a partner who sees your brilliance," he said, "not someone who tears you down just to feel bigger." A small, wry smile tugged at his lips. "As for everything else, my money, my connections, I want you to know something." He met her gaze, steady and sincere. "I admire your independence. I'm here to support you, but you've already proven you can stand on your own." His words filled her with a warmth that melted away every last piece of doubt. Together, they stepped up to the wide window. The city stretched endlessly before them, an intricate tapestry of light, motion, and life. Night had fallen over New York, but inside the penthouse, a different kind of peace had settled, a stillness that felt earned, not gifted. Natalie leaned her head on Damien's shoulder, reflecting on the woman she used to be, the woman who had once been diminished by Brandon's expectations, made to feel like she wasn't enough. She remembered the way silence had once meant fear, the way "not now" had once meant "not you." But that woman was gone. In her place stood someone reborn. A woman who had reclaimed her confidence, rediscovered her love for architecture, and opened her heart to a man who nurtured her dreams, instead of silencing them. She had built something new, this time from her own foundation. Down below, the bright, chaotic pulse of the city surged forward, unmoved by one man's downfall or another's redemption. Yet in that still, intimate moment, Natalie felt something profound: freedom. Not just from Brandon, but from the weight of ever needing to prove her worth to anyone again. She was no longer haunted by the past. She stood at the edge of something new, something beautiful. Hand in hand, with a man whose quiet strength and boundless devotion she cherished more than anything else. There was no need for grand declarations. His presence said it all. Thank you for walking with us through Natalie's journey, one of heartbreak, betrayal, resilience, and, ultimately, quiet triumph. She didn't just survive a painful chapter. She rose from it. She faced down the shadows of her past, let go of the need for validation, and chose herself, piece by piece, truth by truth. Her strength wasn't loud, it wasn't vengeful, it was steady, intentional, free. She rebuilt her life not with noise but with clarity, not with revenge but with peace. And maybe that's the deepest message of all. Dear friend, life, as the Stoics remind us, won't always go the way we hope. People will disappoint us, plans will fall apart, but we are never powerless. Every day we're given a choice to let the pain define us or to use it as fuel for something better. Natalie's story is not just about love lost. It's about the love she found within herself. It's about choosing to rise, not because the world made it easy, but because she refused to stay broken. We don't get to choose what storms come, but we do get to choose who we are after they pass. So let today be the day you stop chasing approval and start honoring your own strength. If this story moved something in you, if you saw even a piece of your own journey reflected in Natalie's, we'd be honored if you tap like, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories that go beyond the surface, stories that remind us we're not alone. Thank you for being here. You matter.